Everybody was enjoying the freedom, but freedom became, well, freedom or liberty sometimes is not used properly. It turns into license. And after the turning of the century, many other newspapers also came into being, and it is my view that newspapers are not maintaining that standard, the standard that I was referring, the standard that was there in the 1950s and the 1960s. I do not see any stalwart columnist like Johur Hossain Chowdhury today. I do not see any stalwart, any eminent or any serious columnist like Abdussalam or Tofajul Hossain Manik Mia today. I'm not saying that no good is being done today, nothing is happening today. I'm not saying that, but I'm trying to say that that level has gone down. Many newspapers are there, many columnists are writing, but that standard is absent. So that is a cause of concern. And there may be, a greater dissemination of information. You are getting information, but the presentation is not always, proper. Mere dissemination is not enough. How the information is being presented is also important. And there is a lack of depth and interpretation. You see, mere presentation of information is not enough. You have to add meanings. You have to interpret, you have to explain. So that is also missing in today's journalism. And sometimes there is an glut of information. There is an overload of information, media messages. So it is sometimes rather difficult to distinguish between what is important and what is not important. Sometimes there is an obsolescence of events. So these are happening in today's journalism. So I think we should also be careful about this. And I'm not naming any newspaper, but I have found that several of the top-ranking newspapers are presenting news which have structural weaknesses, which have also linguistic weaknesses as well. So this is, I think, a matter of concern that we must take into consideration. And in the last 10 to 15 years, I have also seen the emergence of sensational journalism, which is called YOLO journalism. YOLO journalism is not acceptable. You see, sometimes we actually try to mimic some of the Western newspapers in this respect. So YOLO journalism is not ethical, or sensational journalism is not ethical. We are not supposed to make news. We are supposed to write news. Write properly what happened. Write precisely and objectively what happened. We are not here to make news. So making news is another aspect of journalism today. So we have to be, all conscious citizens of the country should be more concerned about this aspect of development. So let me put a brief stop to this discussion of newspaper. If there are questions later on, then I will try to handle them. Let me now turn to television. Television is what you watch today, I think, quite oftener than reading newspapers. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure about what is happening in this university, but at the Dhaka University, I have found that many of the students do not read newspapers. Most of the students do not read newspapers. I hope that the students of BUP are reading newspapers regularly. Do you read newspapers?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yes. That's a good development here. But at the University of Dhaka, when I asked the students And when I actually make inquiries and when I try to test them, I found that most of the students are not reading newspapers regularly. Maybe I am not. I myself do not read newspapers, so they are following the teachers. Well, yes, actually sometimes I do feel like not reading the newspaper. Why? Because it hurts my eye vision. They full of so unnecessary news, unimportant news, and full of stories that jar on my nerves. That's why I avoid reading newspapers. Sometimes it is better to read some detective fiction. Fiction. This is fiction. It's better to read some good fiction. Why should you care to read this newspapers? Read newspapers, but I would not discourage you to read newspapers. But I am sure that you are watching television more than you read newspapers. Because television is more attractive, it's an audiovisual medium, so you feel comfortable there, and you do not need to use a brain, you just sit before that small screen and you watch television. You do not have to think. But when you have to think, when you read newspapers or read books particularly, then you have to think. That's why most people prefer, not in this country, I mean all over the world, I think people prefer to watch television. So you are also doing that. And you are also watching movies and other things on online media. Well, television was eulogized by Marshall McLuhan. I have just mentioned his name. Marshall McLuhan also eulogized, and he said that television is creating the global world. He said it back in the 1970s. And that's true to some extent, because all the countries, all the nations are now closer to one another. So television played a very significant part in that respect. But Marshall McLuhan perhaps did not know at that time that it was also creating division. When there is a flow of information, there may be also animosity, there may be also acrimony, there may be also hostility as well. So it is not that it will create a global village which is peaceful, where the people are very complacent and comfortable. No, that type of global village is not created through television. But television has definitely brought nations closer, and you are instantly getting information about other countries. So that's an advantage. Television in our country, I mean indeed in Pakistan, we were part of Pakistan, you know that history. I don't have to remind you of that history. We were in all Pakistanis at one time. So in Indian East Pakistan, television started, I think, in the early 1960s. And here I would also like to say that a standard maintained by television, even indeed in Pakistan or after independence in the 1970s or the 1980s, that standard was higher. I do not think that today's TV is producing program at that level. Well, I'm not appreciative of what East Pakistani TV did in respect of information dissemination, because information was controlled. That was controlled, no doubt about that. And that is definitely not acceptable. The news was controlled by the government. But I'm referring to other programs. The quality of those programs were better. Entertainment, TV drama, for example, that was better. Even in this 1970s, or definitely in the 1980s, the TV programs were much better. And there was only one TV channel at that time. That was Bangladesh television. So that television produced quality entertainment programs. From the news perspective, it was a failure. From the information perspective, television was a failure. No doubt about that. But from other perspectives, Bangladesh television was much better than almost most of the channels today, what they are doing today. So, There was an unprecedented growth of TV channels in this century. There are so many private channels. So many programs are there. Are you satisfied with the quality of products? Are you satisfied with what is being broadcast in the name of entertainment, TV drama and all that? What is the standard of acting? What is the content of those plays or TV drama? They do not appeal to me. I do not know whether they appeal to you. And television channels need programs almost every day to satisfy the demands of the audiences. That's another problem. So there are so many channels, but we do not have so many writers. There are so many channels, but we do not have so many good actors and actresses. We have so many channels, we do not have so many good singers. So naturally the quality is falling. And also, well, I do not know if it is the influence of external TV channels, because today's journalism, today's Bangladesh cannot be discussed in isolation, because we are part of the globalized world. So you can view the other channels from other countries. Their influence is also impacting on our channels as well. Maybe on the quality, on the content, even on the content of the TV plays. If you watch, the other foreign channels, you will see very boring TV serials, very uninteresting, full of stereotypical representations, full of cliches, full of gender stereotyping, class stereotyping, sex stereotyping. These are, our children, our audiences are constantly exposed to those flow of entertainment. And this has definitely some impact on our TV dramas as well. So we are producing, these kind of media entertainment, which, if I rephrase Shakespeare's words, he was saying, life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then his heart no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So these, TV productions are sometimes full of sound and fury, and signifying nothing, or maybe signifying a very little bit. So our children are constantly and continuously exposed to this kind of media entertainment. I do not think this is desirable. And just think about the talk shows. Well, the talk shows are sometimes horrible. I do not know how the people can talk like this. My students, many of them are now working in different TV channels, and they requested me quite often to take part in this TV show, TV talks, but I was scared. I did never go there. I'm scared, by and large. As I said in the very beginning, that I am not in the glare of publicity. So I avoid TV talk shows and all that. Am I taking too much of your time? So those TV talk shows almost verge on the almost are on the verge of obscenity sometimes. You see, the talkers sometimes feel like grabbing each other, cutting their throats. Luckily this has, not happened. If there is a very, undesirable incident there, sometimes I would not be surprised. So things have gone to that level. This kind of TV shows or TV talks, I think is leaving some adverse impact on the impressionable mind of the young generation. If the young people, see that their elderly, their guardians behave like that, what will they learn? So I think we should pay more attention to the quality of these TV talk shows. And the television channels are full of ads, advertisements. Well, advertisement is necessary because that's an important source of revenue. But so much of advertisement on the small screen, I think has a detrimental effect on your aesthetic sense, and it interrupts your exposure. You don't feel like so much advertising on television channels. So we have to give serious thought to the advertising policy, and also the content of the advertisements. There are also stereotypings. You see, it is called the mass media, but it has turned into a class media. So there are no mass media. No TV channels are mass media. They are all class media. See, they forget that there are large audiences. There are billions of people who are citizens of this country, but I think they forget about this reality of life when they broadcast their programs. They don't take into consideration the needs, their aspirations, their desires, their feelings. The advertisements are sometimes you see rich dishes are presented so crudely. They have to think about the people who have never tested those food in their life. So we have to take into consideration, if you think that media is part of culture, so you have to think about the culture of the nation as a whole. You shouldn't think about the culture of a particular class. And if the culture of the particular is like this, that is also not desirable. That the culture of the rich cannot be like this. Maybe this is our imagination and we're producing things or advertisements like that. So presentation of advertisement, if you look at the BBC advertisements, you will see the difference. So you have to be more refined, have a more aesthetic sense while you are putting these advertisements on this small screen. And the coarseness and crudity of all the programs overall is not acceptable. You see, as young generation, members of the young generation, I think you are trying to develop yourself into good aesthetics, having developed a good aesthetic sense. So if that sense is being, affected by your exposure to this kind of programs, you will definitely not develop properly. So we have to think about our young generation, their development, their growth, their tastes, their feelings, and so on. And online media. Side by side, we should also think about the online media, which is a cause for great concern. Well, there are good things definitely on online media, but there is an adage. Bad money drives out the good money. So that is also happening in case of online media. There is an abundance of obscenity, extreme forms of sensuality in online media. And our generation, not only the young generation, we are also being exposed to this uninterrupted flow of obscenity. So I do not know how to stop this, but this is a reality. There are good things. You can read newspapers on the online. You can also watch good films on the online, but there is a dark side of this online media. And I'm sure that you all perceive what I'm trying to say. So this is happening. So this has also become part of our media. See, we are part of the globalized world. So we cannot think of ourselves in isolation. The windows are open. Now bad winds are, flowing in. So how to stop that, I do not know. So it is only your conscience. You have to develop your conscience. You have to choose the right path. There are several paths. It is you who will decide what you will choose. This is media cornucopia. This is the age of media cornucopia. So you can put a ban on all this. Now you have to decide what dishes you will take. this is a very important matter. And let me now throw some light, shed a bit of light on film, which is another matter of great concern. Again, I will be appreciative of what happened in the 1950s or the 60s, 70s or 80s. After that, there is a sharp decline. You see, in the 1950s, films like Mukho Mukhosh, then Surya Shran in the 1960s, then Jivon Theke Neya. These types of films are rare now. Even after independence, some good films were made, like Surya Dighal Badi. In the 1980s, Alamgir Kobir made some very good films. In the 70s as well, he made some very good films. Unfortunately, he was killed in a road accident in 1989. He was a very promising film director. So those types of films are rare. The mainstream film is full of, obscenity, crime and violence, and, coarse and crude sexuality, dances and music. These are also influenced by, films from other countries. So about a decade ago, the situation went to the extreme, so the government had to intervene. There was a cultural resistance movement against this obscenity in films. So that improved the situation a bit, but overall situation is not that good. It is still that same thing, rawness, obscenity and crudity. And good films are driven out. I think the government should also, take some more initiatives in promoting these good films. Sometimes they give some support, but that's not enough. And cinema, the film industry is also, is not showing very, signs of improvement in the recent years. So that is also another cause of concern. And our exposure to too much violence on the media as a whole, even the foreign films, the Hollywood films that are coming to Dhaka are not of low quality. If you remember, well, you were not born there, if we remember, then you see the films that were shown in our our cinema house at that time, American films or British films, were of a much higher quality. You see Spartacus, films like Spartacus, films like Bridge on the River Kawai. These were, Dhaka cinema halls were full of very good English films in the 1950s and 60s, even in the 1970s as well. But now if you go to the cinema hall, you will, see that most of the films are of great quality, full of violence, crime, horror, and all that. The mainstream film in England or America or in Australia is definitely not good. There are also good films, no doubt, but the mainstream is not good at all. So Bollywood was influenced by Hollywood, and Hollywood is influenced by Tollywood, and then Hollywood. So this is mimicry. We have no originality here. We are just following them blind and aping them. That's why the quality has gone down. So we have not been able to, create a truly national cinema. So there are many lackings there. Finally, I would like to turn to books. That's the only media I consider that can stave off the ill or evil or the adverse effects of other media. Books, my dear students, you are not my students,